In just the past few years, 11 countries around the world have defaulted. And depending how you measure it, somewhere between 48 and 54 nations are either in or at risk of debt distress. That includes over 60% of Africa's low-income countries. As interest rates in the West continue to rise and the dollar strengthens, pressures on countries ranging from Argentina to Ethiopia to Ukraine are only going to intensify. Yet, disputes between the Western nations that make up the Paris Club, China, which has rapidly become the most important lender to the developing world, and commercial bondholders, has held up efforts to restructure and write off unsustainable debts. As one analyst has said, this may not turn into a global debt crisis as in the 1980s, but it is already creating a development crisis, one in which the cost of servicing debts is crowding out spending on urgent needs, from alleviating poverty to boosting growth to addressing the climate crisis. Heidi, let me start with you, if I may. 3 years ago, the G20 agreed on a common framework meant to speed up debt resolution talks because of all these new players that were now involved. 3 years later, none of the countries have actually made it through the program successfully. Sri Lanka and Zambia are getting closer, but we're still not there yet. Why is it taking so long? What's the main roadblock?
So, I think one of the important points is that you already flagged. We have a lot of new players that are around the table, and some are not happy about the table that was there previously, which is the Paris Club. We need to actually get through the debt distress question urgently because there are pressing needs for poor countries in particular to actually move on and avail themselves of some of the new forms of support that are making themselves available. But I think the process is not going well. The common framework has not proven a format that has been conducive to actually the restructuring that we need to see. I think there are several reasons. One, we've had a lack of transparency that has sort of plagued the process. So if you don't have full transparency from all creditors about what the terms and conditions are, how much debt, what is the maturity profile, what is is there collateral involved? And that is actually a serious challenge. We need China in particular to be a constructive participant in the debt negotiations for poor countries. And when I say transparency, I would flag just last night, there was a news story about how aid data found 20 billion additional dollars that China had lent to Pakistan, not 21 billion that they've lent, 21 billion in addition to the 40 plus billion that the World Bank actually had as the disclosed amount of debt from China to Pakistan. So you can't have surprises like that. If you're the IMF, you can't start with a baseline fundamental analysis of how sustainable a debt profile can be if you don't have the full information. The second, you need to have everybody around the same table. If you have a participant that has a go-it-alone strategy, which we've kind of seen, the IMF and the world around the table can't be there to provide funding or debt relief if that money is going to be rechanneled and just repaid to one creditor. And that one creditor that we've seen that happen with is, particularly in the case of Suriname, is to China. And I would say the last thing is time. Time is not a friend here. We've had the common framework now for 3 years, and Zambia was the poster child. It was really the one where you had a new government come in. Everything was the private bondholders, which are often a challenge in the process, actually formed a creditor committee right away. We're still, we just got through a threshold where there was an agreement that allowed the IMF to release some funding to Zambia. But I think 3 years is far too long. We don't have that amount of time. So transparency, not going it alone, and doing it much faster. We need it months, not years.
Got it. I'm pleased to announce that Vera is actually here, so she can join us on stage. That's wonderful. But maybe, Doug, in the meantime, maybe I can turn to you. If what Heidi is saying is true, welcome, by the way, thank you.
Hi, how are you?
If what Heidi is saying is true, does that suggest that the framework itself needs to be scrapped, and what would replace it if not?
Well, the framework doesn't need to be scrapped because there is nothing to replace it. The basic premise is if you have a series of different creditors, they all have to coordinate. The premise of comparability of treatment is a very difficult one to apply. But if you don't have people sitting around the table trying to get there in a collaborative way, the alternative is chaos. And you mentioned Sri Lanka.